The ground shook again as another blast hit the shield above New Haven Colony. Jake pressed his face against the thick glass window of the command center and watched the red energy beams crash down from the dark sky. The protective barrier around their small town flickered like a dying light bulb. It had been doing that for weeks now. "How much power do we have left?" Jake asked without turning around. His voice was tired and rough. He had not slept properly in 3 months. "Maybe 6 days if we're lucky," answered Pete Williams, the colony's chief engineer. Pete was a thin man with dirty hands and worried eyes. "The generators are working too hard. They need rest, but we can't give them any." Jake nodded slowly. 6 days. That was not enough time for help to arrive. Earth was so far away that even radio signals took years to travel there. The colony had been sending distress calls every day, but no one expected an answer. The attack had started on a normal Tuesday morning. Jake remembered it clearly because his daughter Emma had been getting ready for school when the first explosions shook the ground. The alien ships had appeared without warning, dropping out of the sky like black metal birds. Within hours, they had surrounded the entire colony. They were not like humans. They were tall and covered in dark scales, with yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. Their ships were massive and ugly, shaped like giant insects. But the worst part was not how they looked. The worst part was what they did to other planets. Jake had read the reports from other colonies that had been attacked. They took prisoners and used them as slaves. They worked people to death in their mines and factories. Children were separated from their parents and never seen again. No one who was captured by the ever came home. "Sir, we've got incoming fire on the south side," reported Lisa Parker from her position at the communications desk. Lisa had been a school teacher before the attack. Now she helped coordinate the colony's defenses and took care of wounded people. Her usually neat brown hair was messy, and her clothes were dirty from weeks of sleeping in the command center. Jake walked over to the big screen that showed the colony from above. Red dots marked where the enemy ships were positioned. There were 12 of them, each one bigger than any building in New Haven. Green lines showed where their own defenses were strongest. The lines were getting thinner every day. "Tell to move his people back from Sector 7, Jake ordered. "We can't afford to lose anyone else." Collins was in charge of the colony's security. Before the attack, his job had been to stop small fights and deal with drunk miners. Now he led a group of ordinary people who had learned to fight with military weapons. Farmers, shopkeepers, and office workers now carried laser rifles and threw grenades at alien invaders. Jake looked at the numbers on his screen. When the attack started, New Haven had 12,000 people living in it. Families with children, elderly couples, young adults starting their careers. Now only 8,000 were still alive. 4,000 people had died in 3 months. The number got bigger every day. The colony had been built in a valley between 2 mountains. It was supposed to be a safe place where people could mine valuable metals and build new lives. The mountains provided shelter from wind and storms. The soil was good for growing food. The air was clean and fresh. It had seemed like the perfect place to start over. But the mountains that once protected them now trapped them. The ships blocked every way out. Their energy weapons could destroy anything that tried to leave the valley. A few people had tried to escape during the first week. Their burned bodies were still visible on the mountainsides, left there as a warning to others. Jake walked through the corridors of the command center. The walls were covered with messages from families. Children had drawn pictures of their homes on Earth. Adults had written letters to relatives they might never see again. Someone had started a list of people who had died, but it had grown too long to fit on the wall. In the medical center, Dr. Lisa Parker was working on a man who had been hurt in the morning's attack. She had trained to be a family doctor, helping people with small injuries and common illnesses. Now she performed surgery with tools that were never meant for serious operations. She had saved hundreds of lives, but lost even more. "How is he?" Jake asked, looking at the patient. "He'll live," Lisa said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "But we're running out of medicine and bandages and everything else." The supply situation was getting desperate. The colony had been designed to receive regular shipments from Earth. Food, medicine, spare parts for machines, and other necessary items arrived every few months on cargo ships, but no ships had come since the attack began. The colonists were eating their emergency supplies, and those were almost gone. Jake walked to the children's area, where the youngest colonists stayed during attacks. About 200 kids lived there now, many of them without parents. They tried to play games and act normal, but fear showed in their eyes. A little boy named Tommy sat in the corner, drawing pictures with old crayons. His parents had died in the first week of fighting. "What are you drawing, Tommy?" Jake asked, sitting down beside the boy. "Spaceships," Tommy answered without looking up. "Big ones from Earth coming to help us." Jake felt his heart break a little more. The boy was only 7 years old, but he understood that they needed help that would probably never come. "That's a good picture," Jake said softly. "Keep drawing, okay?" As night fell over New Haven, Jake returned to his office on the top floor of the command center. Through his window, he could see the lights of the ships hanging in the dark sky like evil stars. They never moved, never left, never gave the humans a moment of peace. Jake opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small photograph. It showed his wife and daughter on Earth, standing in front of their old house. They had died in a car accident 2 years before he came to New Haven. This colony was supposed to be his fresh start, his chance to build something good after losing everything. Now it looked like he would lose everything again. But this time, he would not be alone. 8,000 people depended on him to keep fighting, to keep hopping, to keep them alive for one more day. Jake picked up the radio microphone and began recording another distress message. He had sent the same message every day for 3 months. No one had ever answered, but he kept trying anyway. "This is New Haven Colony calling Earth. We are under attack and need immediate help. Repeat, we need immediate help. Please respond." The message disappeared into the darkness of space, traveling toward a home that seemed impossibly far away. The alarm sounded at exactly 3:47 in the morning at Earth Defense Command in Colorado Springs. Admiral Brooks was pulled from sleep by the urgent beeping of his communicator. He had been dreaming of his grandson's birthday party, but the dream vanished as he answered the call. "Sir, we have received a distress signal from the outer colonies," said Lieutenant Amy Foster. Her voice was tight with concern. "It's from New Haven on 442B. They're under attack." Sat up in bed and rubbed his eyes. New Haven was one of the farthest human settlements from Earth. The signal had taken years to reach them, which meant the attack had started long ago. "How old is the message?" "Based on the transmission data, approximately 3 years old, sir. The situation there could be very different now." Felt his stomach drop. 3 years. The colonists could all be dead by now or worse, taken as slaves. But there was also a chance that some were still alive, still fighting, still hopping for rescue. "Get me Captain Steve Martinez and call an emergency meeting. I want all department heads in the war room in 1 hour." Dressed quickly and made his way through the underground corridors of Earth's military headquarters. The base had been built deep inside a mountain to protect it from attack. Thousands of people worked there, monitoring threats from across the galaxy and protecting humanity's growing empire of colonies. In the war room, a large screen showed the location of New Haven. It was a tiny dot of light in an ocean of darkness, farther from Earth than most people could imagine. The journey there would take months, even with their fastest ships. Captain Steve Martinez arrived first. He was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. He had commanded warships for 20 years and had never lost a battle. His ship, the UES Vengeance, was the most powerful vessel in Earth's fleet. "What do we know about the attackers?" Steve asked, studying the star charts. Answered Doctor, the base's alien expert. She was a small woman with thick glasses who had spent her life studying hostile alien species. They're an empire that conquers other planets and uses the people as slaves. They've destroyed 17 different civilizations in the past 50 years. Amy Foster pulled up files on her computer. New Haven was established 12 years ago as a mining colony. Population was about 12,000 when the attack began, mostly families with children. Felt anger building in his chest. Families with children. People who had left Earth to build better lives, now trapped and probably dying while Earth remained unaware of their situation. "Sir," said Commander Helen Davis, the fleet's tactical expert, "the distance to New Haven is enormous. Even with our fastest ships, the journey will take at least 8 months. By the time we arrive, the situation will likely be resolved one way or another." "You mean they'll all be dead?" said quietly. "That's one possibility, yes, sir." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the mathematics of space travel. Even traveling at incredible speeds, the universe was so large that help often arrived too late. This was the cruel reality of humanity's expansion to the stars. But had not become an admiral by accepting defeat. He had climbed through the ranks by fighting impossible battles and winning them through determination and clever tactics. He looked around the room at his best officers, the people he trusted to protect humanity. "Captain Martinez, how quickly can you prepare the Vengeance for a long-distance mission?" Steve straightened in his chair. 2 weeks, sir. We'll need to load extra supplies and select a crew for extended space travel. But, sir, we'll be going alone. No other ship can match our speed." "One ship against an entire alien fleet?" Helen asked. "The odds of success are very small." "The odds of success are 0 if we do nothing," replied. "These are our people. They left Earth trusting that we would protect them. We don't abandon our citizens, no matter how far from home they are." Doctor leaned forward. "Admiral, I've been studying military tactics. They rely on brute force and overwhelming numbers. Their technology is advanced, but they're overconfident. They might not expect Earth to mount a rescue mission at such a distance." "What are their weaknesses?" Steve asked. "Their shields operate on a specific energy frequency. If we can modify our weapons to match that frequency, we might be able to penetrate their defenses. It's not much, but it could give us an advantage." Stood up and walked to the large window that looked out over the Colorado mountains. Somewhere beyond those peaks, beyond Earth's atmosphere, beyond the solar system, human colonists were fighting for their lives. They probably thought they had been forgotten, that Earth was too far away to help. They were wrong. "Captain Martinez, you have your orders. Prepare the Vengeance for immediate departure. Doctor, I want you on that ship. Modify our weapons and develop new tactics for fighting the—" "Commander Davis, select the best tactical officers for the mission." "Sir," Amy said hesitantly, "what if we're too late? What if they're already gone?" Turned back to face his officers. "Then we make sure to pay for what they've done. But I don't think we're too late. Humans are survivors. If anyone can hold out for 3 years against impossible odds, it's the people of New Haven." Over the next 2 weeks, the UES Vengeance was prepared for the longest rescue mission in human history. The ship's crew of 400 volunteers knew they might be flying toward their deaths, but not one person asked to be transferred to a different assignment. Lieutenant Colonel Mike assembled a Marine unit of 200 fighters. These were Earth's best soldiers, trained for combat in space and on alien worlds. They practiced boarding enemy ships and fighting in zero gravity. Each Marine carried enough weapons and ammunition to fight a small war. Chief Engineer Nancy Bell worked day and night to upgrade the ship's engines. The Vengeance would need to travel faster and farther than any Earth ship had ever gone. The new jump drives were experimental and dangerous, but they were the colonists' only hope. News of the rescue mission spread across Earth. Families of New Haven colonists gathered at spaceports to send messages and packages that would never reach their destination in time. Children drew pictures for relatives they had never met. Adults recorded video messages expressing love and hope. The night before departure, visited the Vengeance in its orbital dock. The ship was beautiful and deadly, bristling with weapons and filled with humanity's finest warriors. But it looked very small compared to the vastness of space it would have to cross. Captain Martinez found him standing in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Second thoughts, Admiral." "No," said firmly. "Just thinking about the people we're going to save. They've been fighting alone for 3 years, believing that help would never come. Tomorrow we prove them wrong." Steve nodded. "My crew is ready, sir. We won't let you down." "I know you won't. Bring our people home, Steve, all of them." The next morning, Earth watched as the UES Vengeance fired its engines and disappeared into hyperspace. The ship carried humanity's promise to its children. No matter how far you travel, no matter how much danger you face, Earth will come for you. The journey to New Haven had begun. The UES Vengeance cut through the darkness of space like a metal arrow shot from Earth's bow. Captain Steve Martinez stood on the bridge, watching the stars streak past the windows as his ship traveled faster than light. Each streak of light brought them closer to New Haven, but the journey would still take 8 long months. "Jump drive status report," Steve called to his chief engineer. Nancy Bell looked up from her control panel with tired eyes. "The drives are holding steady, Captain, but they're working harder than we designed them for. These new engines have never been tested on such a long journey." Steve nodded. The experimental jump drives were their only hope of reaching New Haven in time to help. Regular engines would take years to cover the distance, but the new technology was dangerous and unpredictable. If the drives failed in deep space, the Vengeance would be stranded with no way to call for help. In the ship's training bay, Lieutenant Colonel Mike put his Marines through combat exercises. The men and women under his command were Earth's best fighters, but they had never faced an enemy like the. Every day they practiced boarding alien ships, fighting in zero gravity, and using weapons in close combat. "Remember," Mike told his troops as they finished their morning drill, "they are bigger and stronger than humans, but they've never fought anyone who refuses to give up. They conquer species that surrender when things get hard. We don't surrender, ever." The Marines cheered and returned to their training. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew that 8,000 human colonists were counting on them. That was enough motivation to keep fighting no matter what. Doctor spent her time in the ship's laboratory, working on new weapons and tactics. She had studied them for years and knew their strengths and weaknesses better than anyone else on Earth. Her job was to find ways to defeat an enemy that had conquered 17 different civilizations. "Their shields are strong, but they have a weakness," she explained to Captain Martinez during one of their daily meetings. "If we can tune our weapons to exactly the right frequency, we can punch holes through their defenses. It won't be easy, but it's possible." Steve studied the technical data on his screen. How many shots will it take to bring down one of their ships? With conventional weapons, maybe 50 or 60 direct hits. With modified weapons using the right frequency, possibly 10 or 12. That's still a lot of firepower for one ship to deliver. "Yes," agreed. "But we have surprise on our side. They won't expect Earth to send a rescue mission across such a vast distance. They think we've abandoned our colonists." As weeks turned into months, the crew of the Vengeance settled into a routine. They trained, they worked, they maintained their ship, and they tried not to think about what they might find when they reached New Haven. The distress signals from the colony had stopped completely months ago. Nobody talked about what that might mean. Commander Helen Davis spent her time planning the battle that awaited them. Her job was to figure out how one Earthship could defeat an entire alien fleet. She ran computer simulations day and night, testing different tactics and strategies. Most of the simulations ended with the Vengeance being destroyed. "We need to be fast and unpredictable," she told her tactical team. "Hit them hard, move quickly, don't give them time to coordinate their response. If we stand still and try to fight them like a traditional battle, we'll lose." The ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Ben Carter, monitored deep space radio signals for any news from New Haven or other human colonies. Most days he heard nothing but static and cosmic background noise. But sometimes he picked up fragments of messages from other settlements, reports of attacks and requests for help that Earth would never receive in time. "Captain," Ben reported one morning, "I'm detecting increased military communications in the sector near New Haven. They're using heavy encryption, but the signal strength suggests a large fleet presence." Steve felt his heart sink. A large fleet meant the aliens were still there, still attacking. But it also meant they hadn't finished their conquest yet. Maybe some colonists were still alive, still fighting. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Carol Grant prepared for the casualties they would face when they reached New Haven. She had no idea what condition the colonists would be in after years of siege, but she was ready for the worst. Her medical supplies could treat hundreds of wounded people, and her team of doctors and nurses had trained for emergency surgery under combat conditions. The hardest part of the journey was not knowing. Every day that passed meant more colonists might be dying or captured. Every malfunction or delay could mean the difference between rescue and arriving too late to help anyone. Nancy Bell worked 18 hours a day to keep the jump drives functioning. The engines made strange noises and consumed more power than they should have. Twice, the drives failed completely, stranding the ship in normal space while she made emergency repairs. "These drives were never meant for such a long journey," she told Steve during the second breakdown. "We're pushing them beyond their limits. I don't know how much more they can take." "How much farther do we have to go?" "About 2 months if everything works perfectly. 3 months if we have more problems." Steve looked at the star charts showing their position. They were farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled, sailing through unexplored regions of space where alien empires ruled and human colonies were rare specks of civilization. The crew dealt with the stress in different ways. Some wrote letters to their families on Earth, knowing the messages would take years to arrive. Others read books, played games, or exercised to stay physically fit. A few simply stared out the windows at the passing stars and wondered if they would ever see home again. Mike organized competitions between his Marines to keep their spirits up. Combat tournaments, strength contests, and tactical puzzle games helped his soldiers stay sharp and focused on their mission. The winners got extra rations and the right to choose movies for the ship's entertainment system. As they entered the final month of their journey, the crew of the Vengeance began preparing for battle. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Combat suits were inspected and repaired. Emergency procedures were practiced until everyone could perform them perfectly. Steve called a meeting of all senior officers to review their battle plan one final time. The conference room was crowded with the ship's best, and people who had volunteered to travel across the galaxy to save strangers they had never met. "We're going into this fight outnumbered and," Steve told his officers. "They have bigger ships, more weapons, and years of experience conquering other worlds, but they've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of when we're protecting our own people." Helen Davis activated the tactical display showing New Haven star system. Red dots marked the expected positions of enemy ships. "We'll drop out of hyperspace at maximum range and assess the situation. If there are survivors, we fight. If we're too late, we make sure the aliens pay for what they've done." "What if they try to negotiate?" asked Dr. "They don't negotiate," Steve replied. "They conquer or they destroy. There's no middle ground with their kind." As the final days of their journey passed, the crew could feel the tension building throughout the ship. They were about to face the greatest challenge in human military history. One ship against an alien empire, fighting to save people who might already be dead. But not one person on the Vengeance regretted their decision to make this journey. They were Earth's warriors, humanity's protectors, and they had come to bring their people home. Jake had not left the underground tunnels in 2 weeks. The surface of New Haven was too dangerous now, with patrol ships flying overhead every few hours. The colony that had once been home to 12,000 people was now a tomb holding barely 3,000 survivors. The mining tunnels had become their final refuge. Families lived in spaces that were meant for storing equipment. Children played quietly in corridors that once echoed with the sounds of heavy machinery. Everyone spoke in whispers, afraid that loud voices might attract the attention of their enemies above. Dr. Lisa Parker moved through the tunnels like a ghost, treating the sick and wounded with supplies that barely existed. Her medical bag now contained herbs and makeshift bandages instead of proper medicine. She had performed miracles with almost nothing, but even miracles had limits. "How many did we lose today?" Jake asked when Lisa returned from the eastern tunnels. "3," she answered quietly. "Mrs. Johnson finally succumbed to her injuries, and 2 of the children in Sector 5 have developed the fever. I don't have anything left to treat them with." Jake closed his eyes and added 3 more names to the mental list he carried. Every death felt like a personal failure, even though he knew there was nothing more he could have done. They had held out longer than anyone thought possible, but time was running out. Collins appeared at the tunnel entrance, his security uniform torn and dirty. He carried a plasma rifle that had seen better days and a face that showed the strain of 3 years of constant fighting. "The perimeter sensors are picking up movement in the northern sectors," reported. "It looks like they're preparing for another push, maybe the final one." Above them, the commander stood in the control room of his flagship. He was a massive creature, covered in dark scales that gleamed under the ship's lights. His yellow eyes burned with impatience as he studied the displays showing the human colony below. 3 years. He had spent 3 years trying to crush this tiny settlement, and the humans still refused to surrender. Other species had given up after weeks or months of siege, but these creatures from Earth seemed incapable of admitting defeat. "Prepare all ships for final assault," ordered his officers. "I want every tunnel collapsed and every human either dead or captured within the next 6 hours. This embarrassment ends today." The alien fleet moved into attack position above New Haven. 12 massive warships, each one capable of destroying a city, aimed their weapons at the planet's surface. Energy cannons charged with deadly power as prepared to end the longest siege of his military career. In the tunnels below, the survivors felt the ground shake as the bombardment began. Dust fell from the ceiling and emergency lights flickered. Parents held their children close while the older colonists tried to look brave despite their fear. Tommy, the little boy who had lost his parents in the first week of fighting, sat in his usual corner drawing pictures with the last of his crayons. He had drawn the same thing every day for 3 years, spaceships coming from Earth to rescue them. The other children had stopped believing in rescue long ago, but Tommy never gave up hope. "They're coming," he whispered to his drawing. "I know they're coming." The bombardment grew stronger. Sections of the tunnel system began to collapse as they concentrated their fire on the areas where they detected human life signs. The survivors retreated deeper underground, but there was nowhere left to run. Jake gathered the remaining colony leaders in what had once been the main storage area. About 50 people crowded into the space, representing all that was left of New Haven's government and military. "This is it," Jake said simply. "They're making their final push. We've held out as long as we could, but we don't have the strength to fight much longer." "What are our options?" asked Lisa, though everyone already knew the answer. "We can surrender and hope they treat us mercifully. Or we can fight to the end and die as free humans. Checked his weapon and looked around at the faces of his friends and neighbors. I didn't come this far to give up now. If we're going to die, let's make sure they remember the cost of attacking Earth's children. The others nodded in agreement. They had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Even if help never came, even if the universe forgot they had ever existed, they would not surrender to tyranny. Above the planet, space itself seemed to tear open like a wound in reality. The UES Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace with its weapons already charging, appearing directly behind the fleet like an avenging angel. Captain Steve Martinez stood on his bridge and saw the alien ship spread out below him. 12 enemy vessels against his single ship. The odds were exactly what he had expected. All stations report ready for combat, announced Commander Helen Davis from her tactical position. Doctor, are the weapon modifications online? Steve asked. Frequency modulators are active and locked onto shield harmonics, replied from the science station. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Steve opened a communication channel that would broadcast on all frequencies. His voice echoed across space, reaching every ship in the enemy fleet and every survivor hiding in the tunnels below. This is Captain Steve Martinez of the United Earth Defense Force Vessel Vengeance. You have attacked our people. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system or face the consequences. On his flagship, laughed at the sight of a single human ship challenging his entire fleet. One small vessel against 12 of the most powerful warships in the Empire. The humans were either incredibly brave or completely insane. Destroy them, ordered his gunners. The alien fleet opened fire with everything they had. Dozens of energy beams lanced through space toward the Vengeance, enough firepower to obliterate a small moon. But the Earth ship was already moving, dancing between the deadly beams with grace and speed that caught the completely off guard. In the tunnels of New Haven, Tommy looked up from his drawing as he heard something that had not existed for 3 years, hope in the voices of the adults around him. The bombardment of the planet had stopped as the alien ships turned their attention to the unexpected threat from space. Listen, Tommy said, tugging on Jake's sleeve. Do you hear that? Jake tilted his head and listened. Through the rock and metal above them, through the chaos of battle, he could hear the distinctive sound of human weapons firing. It was impossible, but it was real. That's Earth technology, said with wonder in his voice. Someone came for us. Someone actually came. On his bridge, Steve Martinez watched as his first salvo of modified weapons struck the shields. Doctor frequency adjustments worked perfectly, punching holes through defenses that should have been impenetrable. 2 alien ships immediately lost their protective barriers and scrambled to restore them. All weapons, concentrate fire on the lead ship, Steve ordered. Let's show them what Earth's Navy can do. The UES Vengeance fired again, its weapons striking with precision that bordered on impossible. The flagship shuddered under the impact as its shields collapsed entirely. For the first time in his military career, Commander felt something he had never experienced before: fear. How are they penetrating our defenses? He demanded of his officers. Unknown, sir. Their weapons are operating on frequencies we've never encountered. In the tunnels below, the survivors of New Haven began to emerge from their deepest hiding places. They pressed against viewing ports and climbed towards surface access points, desperate to see the battle that raged overhead. After 3 years of darkness and despair, light had finally come to their world. The battle for New Haven had begun, and Earth's warriors would not be their victory. The UES Vengeance moved through space like a hunting wolf, striking fast and disappearing before they could respond. Captain Steve Martinez had turned his ship into a weapon of pure fury, darting between enemy vessels and delivering devastating attacks that left the aliens confused and desperate. Target the ship on our starboard side, Steve ordered. Full power to forward weapons. The Vengeance's main guns fired in perfect sequence, each blast tuned to the exact frequency that Doctor had discovered. The cruiser's shields collapsed like paper in a fire, and the follow-up shots tore through its hull with ease. The alien ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from the planet's surface. Commander watched in horror as another of his ships died. In 30 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The human vessel fought with a combination of skill and fury that no other species had ever displayed. His fleet was being torn apart by a single enemy ship. "All vessels concentrate fire on the human ship," commanded. "Ignore the planet, destroy that vessel now." But the Vengeance refused to stay still long enough to be destroyed. Commander Helen Davis had planned their tactics perfectly, using the ship's superior speed and maneuverability to stay one step ahead of the enemy. Every time they tried to surround them, the Earth ship slipped away and struck from a new direction. In the ship's marine bay, Lieutenant Colonel Mike prepared his boarding teams for the most dangerous part of their mission. "Listen up," he told his 200 Marines. "We're going to board their flagship and capture their commander. Show these aliens what happens when they attack human families." The Marines cheered and checked their weapons one final time. They had trained for this moment during the entire 8-month journey, and now they were ready to prove that Earth's soldiers were the finest fighters in the galaxy. Chief Engineer Nancy Bell worked frantically to keep the ship's engines running at maximum power. The experimental jump drives had never been pushed this hard, and warning lights flashed across her control panels. "Come on, you beautiful machine," she whispered to her engines. "Just hold together a little longer." On the planet below, Jake and his surviving colonists watched the battle through the colony's few remaining observation windows. They could see explosions lighting up the dark sky as their rescuers fought against impossible odds. Children pressed their faces against the glass, counting the flashes of weapons fire. "Look, Tommy," said Dr. Lisa Parker, lifting the little boy so he could see better. "Your spaceships came just like you said they would." Tommy nodded seriously, still clutching his drawing of rescue ships. "I told you they would come. Earth never forgets its children." Collins organized the surviving colonists into rescue teams. "When that ship lands, we need to be ready to help. Medical teams, security teams, everyone has a job to do. Our people came to save us, and we're going to help them finish the job." In space, the battle reached its climax as the Vengeance closed in on the flagship. Steve had destroyed 6 enemy ships, but his own vessel was showing signs of damage. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and several sections of the ship had lost power. "Captain, their flagship is trying to escape," reported Helen from her tactical station. "Not today," Steve replied grimly. "Nancy, I need everything you can give me from those engines." "You've got it, Captain, pushing power to maximum." The Vengeance surged forward, chasing the massive alien flagship as it tried to flee the battle. Doctor worked frantically to boost their weapons one final time. "I'm overloading the main cannon," she announced. "This shot will either destroy their ship or burn out our entire weapons system." "Take the shot," Steve ordered without hesitation. The Vengeance's main cannon fired with more power than it was ever designed to handle. The energy beam struck the flagship's rear section and tore through its hull like a hot knife through butter. Secondary explosions rippled across the alien ship as its power systems failed. Commander felt his ship dying around him. Emergency alarms screamed, and his bridge crew fought to keep basic systems online. Through the smoke and chaos, he stared at the human vessel that had single-handedly destroyed his fleet. How was this possible? No species had ever fought with such determination and skill. "This is Captain Martinez to the flagship," came the voice over the communications system. "Surrender now and we will spare your crew. Continue fighting and we will destroy you completely." His yellow eyes burned with rage, but he was not a fool. His fleet was broken, his ship was dying, and the humans had proven they could back up their threats with action. "We surrender," he said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Mike and his Marines boarded the alien flagship through airlocks that had been blasted open by the Vengeance's weapons. They moved through the ship's corridors with military precision, securing key areas and rounding up prisoners. They had never faced humans in close combat before, and they learned quickly that Earth's warriors were not like other species they had conquered. "Bridge secured, Captain," Mike reported over his radio. "We have their commander in custody." With the space battle won, the Vengeance descended toward New Haven's surface. The colonists emerged from their underground hiding places to see their rescuers land in the middle of their damaged settlement. The ship's medical teams immediately began treating the wounded, while engineers started repairs on critical colony systems. Steve Martinez stepped off his ship and was greeted by Jake. The two men shook hands as children ran around them, laughing and crying with joy. After 3 years of darkness, hope had finally returned to New Haven. "We never lost faith," Jake said quietly. "Deep down, we knew Earth wouldn't abandon us." Dr. Lisa Parker worked alongside the Vengeance's medical team, finally having proper supplies to treat her patients. Children who had been sick for months began to recover with real medicine. Families separated by the fighting were reunited in tearful embraces. Tommy ran up to Captain Martinez and handed him his drawing of rescue ships. "I knew you were coming," the boy said with absolute confidence. "I kept drawing pictures so you could find us." Steve knelt down to the boy's level and smiled. "We'll always come for our people, Tommy, no matter how far away they are." As the sun set on New Haven, the colonists and their rescuers worked together to rebuild what had been destroyed. The threat was over, but more importantly, the galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about humanity. Earth protects its children. Distance means nothing. Odds mean nothing. When human lives are at stake, Earth's warriors will cross any void and fight any enemy to bring their people home. Commander, now a prisoner aboard the Vengeance, sent a message to his empire before the ship departed for Earth. "Do not underestimate the humans," he warned. "They fight not just for territory or resources, but for each other. They are more dangerous than any species we have ever encountered." The story of New Haven's rescue spread throughout human space, inspiring other colonies and serving as a warning to hostile aliens. The message was clear: attack one human settlement and you face the wrath of all humanity. Years later, Tommy would grow up to become a pilot in Earth's expanding fleet. He would carry with him the memory of the day when hope descended from the skies, and he would help ensure that no human colony would ever face such darkness alone again. The galaxy was vast and filled with dangers, but it had learned to fear the fury of Earth's warriors when they came to protect their own.